Greetings, sisters and brothers. Happy New Year. Happy 2024 to everybody. I have not posted on African History Club for quite some time. I think people have still been making good use of the 54 or so episodes that I did covering a wide and long aspect of African history, from origins of humanity to contemporary topics. As many of you know, I've now been a part of a weekly podcast called Kumbukeni. Kumbukeni is a Kiswahili word which means remembrance or memories, and it refers to the past. Kumbukeni, and I have been co hosting it with two comrades. One is a sister from Kenya, Sister Nduku, who lives in New Jersey. I, of course, am in New York City, and a brother from Nigeria who lives in London, Brother Adesoji. We've done about a year's worth of podcast now. Last week, Adesoji departed from the show because he wants to focus on some books he's working on now. So it's now myself and Sister Nduku. And that is the reason why I have not been posting on African History Club. But I felt like posting this episode, and I may be posting on a more regular basis now on African History Club as well. Because sometimes on Kumbukeni, we don't flesh out some of the topics um, that we discuss in the way that I can get to do it on African History Club. And for example, the South African lawsuit by the South African government against Israel for violating the Genocide Convention of 1948. So that is the topic that I like to focus on today. It's already been widely covered, and in terms of the atrocities against civilians in Gaza, that is also covered on a regular basis by the general media. And of course, fortunately, the news is no longer dominated by the corporate media, the usual suspects. I remember just before the United States and its NATO allies invaded, destroyed Libya, a BBC so called reporter asked the late Senator McCain, "So, Senator, when are we going in?" We going in. And that was supposedly a journalist. So that just sums up the horrific nature of corporate media, weapons of mass disinformation. But fortunately, we have multiple media outlets now. We have social media, and we have media that challenge the monopoly of the usual suspects, the BBC, the New York Times, and the other so called mainstream. I tend to call them downstream media because, as I've said in the past, by accepting the term mainstream and referring to them as mainstream, it means that um, all other types of media should be considered as fringe and not mainstream. No, we have to take back the ownership of what mainstream really should be. We are the ones who live the mainstream experience. So we should not cede that title to corporate media. So I don't want to repeat the aspects of this lawsuit that have already been covered and are still being covered by other outlets and other opinion writers and commentators. Many of you know I come from a Pan African perspective. So there are a number of points that I just wanted to make in the short time that I want to spend with you today. First of all, I think this lawsuit by South Africa has already succeeded in a number of ways. Primarily, it's taken away the monopoly of the narrative that had been dominated by Israel and the United States. And of course, they wanted to keep the conversation very narrow. That on October the 7th, Hamas committed terrorism against Israel by attacking, killing some soldiers, killing many civilians, hijacking civilians. And therefore, Israel is justified in any type of retaliation that it chooses to take, not even against Hamas, but the Palestinians generally, because the argument is that Hamas is embedded within the population of, uh, of Gaza. So think about that. Essentially, accepting that argument, of course, legitimizes genocide because you're essentially accepting that Israel has the right to attack the 2 million population, the civilian population, in order to eliminate Hamas. And of course, that argument is not acceptable to much of the world, regardless of what uh, Netanyahu and Joe Biden think. So it came as a great relief by South Africa filing this lawsuit and the International Criminal Court, a great relief to many of us, a huge part of humanity that we've been